Today, I have with me Susan Wenograd, our CMO here at Three Ventures, and Andrew Smith, one of our senior paid media managers or account managers. Andrew, I'm sorry if I got that one wrong. And today, we're talking about PMax. We had a pretty large client project that we wanted to bring some insights to you all with. And so, Susan, there were two topics in there that we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into today. That was the PMax finding versus shoppings with product IDs, as well as PMax sort of ignoring search. So you want to tell us a little bit about some of the details?
Yeah, so this client came to us. I think the context is probably important here. They had tens of thousands of SKUs, all put into, I think it was what, five or so PMax campaigns.
Yep, 5 campaigns.
Yeah, which is a lot of SKUs and very few campaigns. So the only thing they still had running that was not PMax was brand search. There was no non-brand search. There was no non-PMax oriented shopping. So it really raised two questions. The first is PMax doing everything it should be, which we suspected probably not, just because this was a large account and that's a lot of ground to cover. So it opened up the question of, is there room for other things, right? Should it be doing shopping alongside Performance Max? If we do, what does that look like? Like, what is Performance Max not doing well that we should backfill? And then same thing when it came to search. Like, they had the brand search piece covered, but is Performance Max doing what it should be on the actual search side? So that was the initial question we were trying to get to see, do we need to structure this differently? How can they get better insights? How can they control, allocation of budget to SKUs, all those kind of e-commerce type questions that are very common. So that was what we started with. And then I guess as we started to dig in, first we ran a script just to get an idea. They're not totally accurate, but a directional PMax script to just understand, what is Performance Max doing? The results looked fabulous, but we knew that a lot of that was probably brand. The thing that was interesting that we found was that it wasn't just that it was brand, it was using basically shopping for everything. Like, there was nothing going towards search, hardly at all. So that was the first thing that we noticed, was it was doing well with shopping, but it was also because it was brand. And then there was the search piece, which it just didn't seem to be doing anything. So that was what initially guided our setup.
Even with branded search terms, it wasn't doing anything with search, or was it preferring
It
shopping?
was preferring
and branded?
shopping. It was still preferring shopping. The search was a really, really small part of it. And I think part of that was because there's something in the way that exact match search interplays with Performance Max, where I think it still is weighing the exact match a little bit more, possibly, because it was still giving a lot to the exact match brand stuff they were running on the search side. So that was taking the volume. It just seemed to really go crazy with brand search when it came to shopping.
Now, what about if you were testing about like removing some of the brand terms, right? Because you now have that feature in PMax. Was there any variation or change in behavior?
So it's kind of a misnomer, and I didn't actually really even understand it at first until it was rolled out in beta and we could see it. But you can't actually negate search terms. You can negate domain references, essentially, which is, I don't know.
Yeah, so one problem with that would be, like, if it was the actual brand name, or a misspelling could show up, or...
Yeah, and these guys had a lot of people with misspellings, and then also, like, they'd get part of the name wrong, because the name is kind of generic. So they might, if it was like something house, right? Instead of house, they might say street, so it's like, but it still knew that was the brand that it meant, but you can't negate that. So when you would look at things, and you would see this in their brand search too, even for the exact match, there would be versions that were not exactly the brand name, but that's what the person meant. So you can't negate that stuff from Performance Max.
They would be taking sort of, I would recommend probably like the best or top products or whatever it would be, and then instead of showing search ads, they would be just throwing those products in there for a lot of their branded terms and avoiding the brand altogether, huh?
Yes, I think that's an accurate way of putting it.
One question I have, just based off what we're talking about, is, does a PMax campaign, is it able to show up in two positions at once? So the fact that it does show up in shopping more than search, Does it have
I think
to choose?
it does, because I think someone just showed a screenshot of how confusing that's getting. I'd have to go back and look at my tweets, but someone actually tackled that, Andrew, where they were like, this is getting weird because it looks like there's multiple listings and they don't look the same because PMax is putting in different stuff than what their search one is putting in. So I think that it can serve both, or someone discovered it could. I don't know if they have since stopped that, but someone had tweeted about
through? That's what I want to know, because like, for example, site links and search, it's just generally impressions and click-through rate for, let's say if there's 4 site links that are shown, it gets 1 click. All 4 of those site links, the way that the metrics work, record a click.
Yeah.
Right. And then, it's extremely confusing from a data perspective.
It's just getting worse.
So was there ever a case when you had tested to see if Google had any preference to either preferring PMax over shopping or PMax over search?
It almost always ended up preferring PMax. The only times it didn't, I would say, was probably non-brand search, which was kind of funny. We were just like, it just didn't seem to know what to do as much if it was something that it couldn't immediately match to shopping. When we ran the non-brand search stuff, I think, Andrew, didn't we finally optimize it to get like over a 3.0 ROAS, which is, I mean, it's high for e-commerce. That was on non-brand.
Yep. Yeah. It was performing similarly to the PMax campaign.
Yeah. And it was all incremental. Like when you looked at PMax, nothing was lost on the PMax side. Like it didn't lose it didn't affect its spend. It didn't reduce its ROAS. So this just appeared, from what we could tell from the data, to be all incremental by adding non-brand search. It wasn't cannibalizing anything.
Interesting. And so with that said, was there ever a case where maybe you had any insight into testing PMax and then testing shopping, where you were able to get see its difference in behavior?
It was actually kind of accidental that we had run in the beginning. We said, okay, let's run standard shopping and then also non-brand search against some of these categories that are in PMax and just see what happens. So like I said, on the non-brand search side, we saw that we picked up a lot of revenue and searches and stuff that weren't happening. Shopping was different because the way that it was supposed to be run was that anything that we ran in our shopping test campaigns, those product IDs should have been excluded from Performance Max. We didn't realize till later that they weren't, because we weren't managing the Performance Max campaign. I kind of found it by accident. But one of the things that we found was it essentially will optimize to the product ID, but it will prefer its version in Performance Max. So one of the things that we were seeing was we would pull these things into standard shopping. They would start to do well in standard shopping, and then they would just fall off a cliff. And we're like, why does it keep doing this? So once we discovered that the same product ID existed in both, we went back and looked at that product ID in the Performance Max campaign. And all of a sudden, like when we would run it in standard shopping, on our side, we're seeing it start to do well. Once Google saw it was doing well, it would start preferring Performance Max for that same product ID.
So it's almost like they were using the product ID data regardless of the
correct.
Campaign type.
It didn't care necessarily. I don't want to say it didn't care where it was, because I think it did care, because it started preferring Performance Max. So obviously they do care. But these were ones that really didn't get a lot of volume until we started like getting data to it. And then it was almost like as soon as there was this green light of, hey, this thing is doing well, all of a sudden it just would fall out of the standard shopping and start picking up in Performance Max. We did not see that with non-brand search. This just seemed to be something specific with shopping and the product IDs.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And so with that said, it kind of introduces a new problem, which is if you have, however many tens of thousands of SKUs and you're being forced into the, Google automation, trust us, Google, where we know best. It seems like there could be a lot of neglect given to different product SKUs that maybe don't have high average order values or just don't have tons of data with it, but are definitely good in terms of filling the gap, sort of increasing, in small amounts, average order price, that type of stuff. Seems like it might be neglecting that. Was that a case that you had found at all?
That's what we were leaning towards. I think, the engagement was only for a certain amount of time, so we can only test but so much. But one of the things that Andrew and I were encouraging them to test to see if it helped with that problem is in Performance Max, you can have different listing groups. and they weren't taking advantage of that. So they'd have, one product feed, let's say for, their top selling products, but that could be across, 8 different product types that are completely unrelated, but they were all going through the same listing group, which means they were using the same headlines, they were using the same photos. So it wasn't very specific to the product types. So one of the things that Andrew and I were curious about is if you then took that and actually broke them down into listing groups the way that you normally would, or break them into separate campaigns, does it start to fix that problem? Because that was one of the things, obviously, you can't really tell. Like, is it just doing this because it has these 60 products that are super high AOV, and so it's going to pick the one that's $300 every time? Or is it doing that because that actually is the one that's going to perform best? That part was really unclear. So that was kind of a phase 2 that we uncovered from a setup perspective, is once we answered the question, okay, non-brand search needs to be incremental, but there's this weird stuff with shopping and it's still just eating your brand and it's not really reaching non-brand shopping. That was the phase 2 that we had recommended that they considered doing this year, was let's tackle the structure of your PMax to see if we can get that to work better. Because we're firm believers that, PMax has a place, but it needs to be done the right way. And that might not look the same way for every brand.
All right, so let's talk about the final segment I got here for you all. We're going to call it Future Trippin'. Future Trippin'. This is where we talk about what could be changing in 2024. And obviously, Google had some pretty big news this week, laying off 30,000 employees, which is about 3 times what they did last year. They did about 12,000 last year. This comes with a lot of the sales and support teams for ads, and a lot of
Side note, I think it said it had the potential to lay off that many.
Oh, potential layoff that many. Okay.
Well, yes, not that they have, but they're saying. But the article is that AI could possibly displace that many jobs.
There you go.
So,
the potential.
Yes.
So if we're being forced into the world of PMax and automation with these campaigns, future tripping, what can account managers or business owners be thinking about to sort of drink the Google Kool-Aid, but still retain control while giving the system what it wants?
I want Andrew's answer to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, similar to what Susan was just saying, how you lay out your listing groups in really thought out categories. So if it's a specific category, having headlines that are specific to that, et cetera. And then, having more than one PMax campaign based on categories, so you can have some type of control, at least over the messaging, the products going through there, and the performance for each of those categories. That would be my thought.
And I think from like a structural strategic perspective, one of the things that I talked a lot about this past year at conferences, and that I essentially was what I think is going to happen in 2024, and the way we, not just the account strategists, but just also people that manage it or that oversee the media, or even CMOs need to understand, is that our job really isn't to like manage keywords anymore. It's to guide Google on what it is we're trying to do. They don't care as much anymore about what the search terms are that we think users are going after. They want to know what it is we're trying to accomplish, how much we're willing to pay to have that happen, right? So it's not that they don't want the inputs, but the type of inputs they want are very different than they used to be. And I still encounter brands that are like, well, we want to see the keyword list you're bidding on. And like, that's fine, but that's not what ultimately is driving your results at this point. Because I could give you a list of 50 exact match keywords. You're going to match to 2,000 keywords or search queries. Like, it doesn't really, they're directional at best at this point. So I think the things that companies have hyper focused on in the past, and the way they've tried to manage paid search people in the past, that needs a great big refresh and update, because there's a huge disconnect there.
So it's really about training the machine and understanding how that works. That's obviously one of our specialties here at Three Ventures, not just with this team, but also outside of this group. With that said, any closing thoughts?
It's going to be interesting to do this a year from now.
I guess
I'm very curious to see what happens this year and what we're talking about at this exact same time in 2025.
I'm hopeful that they give more control within PMax, but to be seen. Like, it would be nice if we were able to see search terms, were able to add negatives. I think at the end of the day, it would make that campaign type more powerful, to have that little bit more of control. And I know over time they have been releasing certain things, like being able to see more search insights, stuff like
beta
that.
for search term themes now too.
So they're slowly rolling some insights out, but just not fast enough.
Well, I mean, I think about it like this: the concept of one campaign to rule them all for the Lord of the Rings geeks out there. That makes a lot of sense, right? Remarketing, display, search, YouTube, shopping, etc. What doesn't make sense is that you wouldn't have the ability to have some levels of control over that. So you talked about, hey, keywords. We're largely getting away from keywords, going towards concepts. That makes perfect sense. But we should be able to control audiences and intents and preferential treatment to certain types of product IDs or certain types of subjects or intent groups for our marketing, and some preferential treatment to what we can tell Google is what our objective is. An objective is not just new customers or returning customers, as in the PMax settings. It's specific types of products we want to make sure we sell. Our top products, our high average order value products. We want to make sure that we have a certain amount of budget being dedicated to, our low volume but high number of SKU type of categories, right? These controls don't exist today. I hope that they'll come in, and then the future of our work, at least for us, the last 2 to 3 years, has always been making sure we're giving the data to the machine in the way that makes sense for how we operate our business. I think that trend just needs to continue. And so with that said, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch up with you next time.